say a group gets into something pretty deep and gets into something really problematic, i.e. a previous issue, argument or conflict, what would you do in that situation? Take it offline or deal with it then and there? And maybe I'll share my reflections on your question here first, and then I'm going to ask you a question about it as well. But on one level, I'm probably not the best person to ask this question, which is kind of funny because it hasn't happened to me yet in a really dramatic way, at least. I'm sure there might have been stuff bubbling under the surface that I wasn't aware of because I don't know the teams that well. I do know of one team, and this story I think was in the online masterclass with the two fellows who were in conflict, and they'd come to like blows previously before the workshop. I see some nods heading to people. Remember that story? If not, I might share it again quickly. But so the manager came to me and said, two of my team haven't talked to each other in over 18 months, I think it was. Should we, and they've been in a fight before in the workplace, should we put them in the same group or put them separately? And my initial instant reaction was put them in the same group together, because Jen Marnie, who was one of the first ever customers of this game, actually way back, she's a conflict resolution specialist, and she said that most conflict comes down to miscommunication. And I think at this core, this game is a game about communication. And my gut feeling was that if that's the case, my assumption was they probably had never had a chance to connect in this way before. So I said put them together, and then I quickly thought, oh, that might have been a little bit rash of me, since I hadn't experienced it before or even suggested that before. But I told him not to tell me who the people were or what groups are going to put them in, so I wasn't biased by it. And then after the workshop, I remember the two of them communicating and talking and sharing their lists, and one guy took some cards out and put some cards back in and said, oh, I'm actually just going to share. I came all this way, because he'd moved offices by then. So I have seen people and heard of people being in conflict. But the actual the cause of the conflict didn't come out in that, Kaylee, so that wasn't part of the conversation. But I'm sure it will happen in the future, and I have heard of it happening with others, and I think about it a lot because I always try to prepare myself for so-called worst case scenarios, or all eventualities. So I have been thinking about this, and I think it depends on a few variables here. And the first one might be how experienced you are at facilitating conflict in teams. And I am not experienced in facilitating teams through conflict. And so if it were me, I probably wouldn't deal with it then and there. I'd suggest that we observe / identify that it's come up, and then suggest with the team leader that we come back to that at a later date. That would be my personal approach to it to begin with, just because I'm not great at / experienced at all at facilitating conflict. And I certainly think you work to your strengths. But if you are comfortable with conflict in the workplace, or helping teams or people through it, then it might be worth dealing with then and there. But I think that might come down to two things. One, how big the team is. Because if you're doing a 30 or 40 person workshop, it's going to be very difficult to help people through that, or in a big environment, without derailing the whole of the session completely. And if it's in a if it's in a big group, I would definitely take it offline, or suggest that we come back to that, or with the leader, we come back to that, because of what we want to achieve in the session. If it is a smaller group, then it's once again, using your intuition and saying, am I comfortable with dealing with conflict as a facilitator? And two, is that conflict or argument between two people specifically, or does it involve the group? Because if it's just between two people and that's not related to the rest of the team, then it might not be beneficial for that session to be used for that. But if it is wider than that, and it is a whole team thing, then definitely, I think potentially you could do that. Deal with it then and there. And Steve Hargraves, so he's our specialist. He's one of our specialist elephant riders. He's got to the second to top tier of, in the last year, he's facilitated over 40 workshops. And he also deals with conflict in the workplace. And he often says that he's run workshops where the outcome of the workshop, the supposed outcome of the workshop was to map the emotional culture of the team, but they ended up going down a different track based on what came out in some early conversations. So for him, he had the skill set, he's got the experience, and is comfortable himself with those conversations. So he let the conversation move somewhere else. But not all of us as facilitators are going to be comfortable with that / have the skills. So I think it comes down to those sorts of variables. There's no I don't believe there's a hard or fast rule with it, unfortunately. Hopefully you don't think that's a cop-out, but I just don't believe there's a hard and fast rule for it. Certainly though, if it does come up, I think you acknowledge it in the room and say, almost even celebrate the fact that it came out, and then this is what we're going to do after, to then bring us back to what the agenda or what the purpose of the session was. Yeah, those surprises aren't the sorts of surprises we'd ideally want in sessions, right? I think maybe a question, I've asked this a few times before workshops of the leader or the person who's commissioning, so to speak, the workshop, is there anything that I should know about the team before the session, or anything I should know about individuals within the team before the session? Sometimes it might be worth just posing that question, especially now that you've had that experience, Kaylee, as well. And it gives you a bit of a general heads up on that. Because, for instance, you could then decide, maybe based on discussion with the leader, if you have those people in separate groups, for instance, if they have been really heated before. And that might be one way for you to approach it moving forward. But certainly asking that question pre-workshop, if you are the coach or facilitator, is there anything I need to know about the individuals within the workshop or the relationships people have got? It'll give you a chance to get to know the team a bit more before you get in the room as well.